Hi, it's Liz, and I have been working on a video that talks really specifically about an experience that I had, a relationship that I had with a really narcissistic guy, one that I felt comfortable sharing publicly, but unfortunately, it's been, for whatever reason, like not editing correctly. Like YouTube Studio hasn't been working well for me, so um, I it was supposed to be ready like the day before yesterday, and it's still not ready. So I'm sorry about that. But I wanted to share my response to the interview that Chris Hansen did with Billie because I just watched it last night, and it was really wild. Like I could see so much of myself in her, and it was really especially interesting because she's only a few years out from all of this, and she's still, I believe, in her 20s. And you could just see the interplay between her and Chris Hansen, who was like clearly shocked by the things that she was saying. And he's like, that's really messed up. That sounds like a cult. And she kept kind of being like, yeah, I guess. Like what she was saying with her words were very much like continuing to sort of minimize the things that happened. And, they were still somewhat normalized for her. And I remember that. It took me a lot of years to have the perspective to look back and see how messed up certain things were, including things that were rape and sexual assault that I didn't register for me at the time that that's what they were, because it was just so normalized, and I was so used to my autonomy being stepped on and erased that I just didn't even realize it was happening, or I didn't take it with the seriousness that I do now. And I didn't realize how much it had hurt me. And that's the other thing too. Like while she's saying these minimizing things, you see her, she's almost shaking. She's clearly traumatized and scared about how Greg is going to react. And she kind of goes into this rational space with her words about how like, well, he can't really do anything to hurt me, but she's still scared. She still hasn't totally emotionally extricated herself from the brainwashing. And I know that brainwashing sounds really dramatic, but it's more common than people realize. It's not actually very difficult to quote unquote brainwash people, especially when they're young and or vulnerable. I mean, youth is a form of vulnerability. There are other ways that you can prey on people, or other people you can prey on other than just young people. But if you get people to open up to you in a certain way, they can really warp the way that you think and the way that you then, live. It's not some science fiction CIA stuff. It's everyday stuff that people do. And I think it's shocking for those of us who are not inclined to manipulate people to that extent, at least. It just seems unrealistic, or like why would anyone do that? How could anybody do that and just kind of keep living with themselves? Some people can, and it's not uncommon. It's not. It's very, there are three different men that really come to mind as I'm digging more and more into this Onision stuff. And none of them did things, I don't want to say the things they did were not as bad, because all of these men have raped women, and all of these men have seriously abused women and been violent towards women. So, but I think none of them were able to amass as much power as Greg, as much social power and as much control. um, over such large groups of people as Greg has. And I think that that's really the difference. It's not that they, I mean, all of these men, I think, could easily be doing more or less what he's doing if they were in a position to do so. You know? I would not put any of it past any of them. It's just three in my life, and that's not rare. Like, I'm not even one of the people who's the most targeted by that. I know people who are truly like kind of walk around with a target on their back for that kind of thing because of the trauma they've experienced and because of their personality type. All of those narcissists had a sort of mixed experiences with me. I don't think any of them were totally satisfied because I never capitulated to them as much as they wanted, even though they did definitely get inside my head and hurt me and have way too much of my loyalty for way too long. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to talk about one of them, and the one I'm going to talk about is probably the one who, like, he didn't personally hurt me as much as the others, and that's part of why I'm willing to talk about it. But he was also somebody who was sort of like quasi-famous in a certain scene, and there's a lot of weird similarity that I see there. And in terms of some of the stuff that he did, like he did what Billie described with, like, she said that Greg would sort of create needless drama between her and Kai so that he could be in the middle of it and sort of exert power over both of them and kind of act like I don't know, it sounded like he was supposed to sort of play himself off as being like a counselor or something for them, which is super creepy. But yeah, this guy, he played some, like, a lot of what I talked about in the video is like, he played these weird mind games between me and his girlfriend. And it was in a situation where we had to all spend a lot of time together. And so it was bizarre. I mean, I just had such a hard time processing it for so long because I would never behave that way. So it was difficult for me to understand his motivations. But in retrospect, it's just very clear that he liked playing games with people. It was fun for him, and it allowed him to have more power over both of us. It's weird stuff. What else? There was something else that I really got out of that interview. I can't remember what it was. Oh yeah. I also wanted to mention too, because I watched the Blaire White debate. Well, some of it anyway. It got kind of, it was very entertaining, but it got kind of repetitive after a while. What I feel like was really missing from that conversation was, I mean, she was really getting on him for having these pictures of 13-year-old girls that he, took from his rate me, whatever, message boards. I forget what they were exactly, and put them in his videos, and they were scantily clad, and it was creepy. And, she's totally right. It's super creepy, obviously. It's like amazing to me that he would try to argue that against that point. But like, it would be creepy even if none of them were underage. And that's kind of the weird thing. Like, he was trying to sort of keep hitting on that point. Well, like, a lot of them were, not underage. A lot of them were adult women. And it just doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, because it does matter, because he has this whole systematic pattern of targeting particularly young women. But just in general, it's very creepy to me that he would invite his fans, people who already admire him, to have their bodies rated by him. I mean, his justification for it is silly and not worth engaging with. But like that's just such a typical narcissist thing to do, to like take people who already admire you and put yourself in a position where you're an authority and they are seeking your approval. Like explicitly in this case, very explicitly seeking your approval and putting you up as this figure who, you know, whose criticism or approval is like taken as objective truth, you know? Like that's a pretty crazy level of authority. And that is exactly what every narcissist I've ever dealt with did in some way. They found a way to at least try to position themselves that way in my life. And some of them were more successful than others at that. The one that I talk about in that video definitely was successful in that, partially because he was so much older than me and could, you know, he was intelligent enough to be very dazzling to me and for me to take him seriously. And he was successful enough too, that that's why it took me so long to sort of get his voice out of my head. And that's what I'm talking about when I say that, is like, I always had, for years after that, I had this sense, no matter what I was doing, of how much he would approve of it. You know, what he would say if he could see me, and whether he would approve or criticize me. And even after I decided I didn't care about that, it was still in the back of my head. It took so long to not, quote unquote, hear that anymore in my thoughts. One of them, one I haven't talked about at all, either on my Patreon or publicly, I don't know if I'm going to. I haven't decided, but he used to do some of the stuff, again, that Greg does specifically with his partners, which is he would punish me for things like, that's a huge red flag. That's a form of emotional abuse. I mean, it's one thing to disagree about things. It's one thing to be angry at one another, and even say like, this was wrong. What you did was wrong, you know? Or even be like, I'm not going to let you do this to me or something. You know, that's healthy. Those are boundaries. Those are disagreements. You know, that's conflict. That's okay. But to like directly be like, I'm going to punish you because you have an opinion that I want you to have, kind of a thing. So he would take my things away. He actually got, so like his friend gave me this hat. And when I was behaving badly, i.e., using my agency to do things in my own life that didn't really affect him, that he didn't like, or expressing opinions that he didn't like, basically being uppity, you know, then he would take away my hat. And it's like, it's a stupid thing, like in and of itself, like it's not like that's an act of violence, but it's a very disturbing mentality that you would try to have that kind of authority over somebody when you're supposed to be in an equal relationship and build yourself up that way. I mean, I get that people have, you know, whatever, consensual arrangements to be that way, but we did not. You know, it wasn't a kink thing. It was just him trying to exact control over me. And that was one way that he did it. Of course, he did it also through violence. But, I mean, he also just reminds me of Greg because they have kind of similarly terrible senses of humor, just obnoxious and childish all the time. Like I read Greg's Twitter. It is disgusting. Like, and not just disgusting, but like embarrassing. Like, the dude's my age. Like, I do not know anyone my age who jokes like that. You know, maybe some of them, you know, in their private sex life talk like that. to their partners. You know, I wouldn't know, but they certainly don't do it on Twitter and say it's a joke or satire. Satire of what? Yourself? Like, it was just so, it was so, so childish. It makes a lot of, well, anyway, I'm not gonna go off. I'm done for now. That's just some of my thoughts. It's just so interesting seeing all of this stuff exposed, because there's just so much I relate to. There's so much that it's so validating. It's so validating to see this stuff and to see it being treated seriously, especially like someone like Chris Hansen, for whom it's his, you know, profession to deal with, you know, predators and abusers. It's been really helpful to process a lot of this past stuff, because so much of it was so normalized at the time, not just by me, because I was, you know, young and being taken advantage of, but by all the people around me, even people who were older, people who really should have known better. You know, from my perspective, everybody was acting like it was okay, you know, and it's not. It's really not. All right. Bye.